Welcome to Charge the Wave, focused on entrepreneurs, executives, and icons who are giving it their all to build companies, cultures, and communities. Without further ado, here's our next episode.
Hi, let's jump right in. Today, our guest is Cole Graham, Virtual Fork co-founder. Very excited to have you today on the episode, Cole. What we like to do is we like to jump right in with the origin story. Does that sound good?
That does. Thank you so much for having me, Ty. Really appreciate talking with you this morning.
Great,
But
great.
yeah, I can start.
Yeah, where did you grow up and how would you describe it?
So I grew up in Seattle, Washington. My parents were both born and grew up in small towns in rural Canada and moved down to the US, where my younger sister and I were born in the late 90s. And so when they were raising us, they really tried to instill that, small town work ethic that both of them knew when they were growing up. And I think because of that, I was able to kind of take that in my childhood and use that to kind of have a very Canadian American childhood in Seattle. I played hockey. I did all of the stereotypical Canadian things, but my childhood was very pleasant and it was great growing up in Seattle.
Any interesting challenges or experiences you can recall from your formative years?
I think the biggest thing for me on the Canadian American thing is that I was raised as a Canadian growing up out of the country, and because of that, I didn't necessarily fit in as an American when I was in the U.S. or a Canadian when I was in Canada. And so because of that, there was a little bit of a difference between how I saw myself and how I saw my friends. Um, Not saying that Canadian culture is, anything that's that different than American culture, but it is a little bit different. And I definitely felt that it was something that I was always cognizant of when I interacted with people, that there was a little bit of a cultural difference between myself and other people I was talking with. Um, it didn't necessarily make me feel like an outsider per se, but at the same time, I always was. I always knew that my cultural background was something to be proud of, and it did impact a lot of my decisions about how I carried myself, who I was friends with, other things like that. So not really a challenge, but definitely something that I was aware of and impacted me a lot when I was growing up.
Wow. Any role models or mentors you'd like to give a shout out to that had an impact on you?
I have to think about this a little bit. Of course, I had a lot of role models and mentors that were very, very impactful for me growing up. Um, One of my biggest interests when I was younger was aviation. I loved aviation, to the point where anytime I would even see a plane in the sky, I'd drop everything and just watch it. And because of that, I gravitated towards that world in my young life, childhood, and adolescence. Um, so my mentors when I was growing up were either pilots or air people who worked at airlines, things like that. I was very fortunate when I grew up a little bit more to go to aviation focused high school in Seattle, which sounds very weird, but it was a great experience. All classes were taught in the theme of aviation in some way or another. And because of that, I was fortunate enough to become friends with one of the former CEOs of Alaska Airlines. Um, and at that point, my dream job was to take his job as an airline CEO. Um, and he was a very, very influential mentor to me. during my high school years. And I really appreciated his guidance as I was trying to figure out what my career would be afterwards.
Wow, that's super interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Fun fact, you and I were both valedictorians and student graduation day speakers at our respective high schools. How did you choose USC?
So I went to USC for a year, actually. I went to this program. It was called World Bachelor in Business, and it was a triple degree granting program of which USC was one of the degrees. Um, so my first year was in LA. My second year I spent in Hong Kong at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. And then my third year I spent in Milan, Italy at the Università Bocconi in Milan. Um, and it was amazing. It was a business degree. Well, all of the degrees were business degrees, but a little bit different based on the specialty of each school. So USC focused a little bit more on entrepreneurship. In Hong Kong, it was very finance oriented. And in Milan, was a very heavy law emphasis. And so I kind of feel like I got a little bit of everything based on the different schools I went to. The fourth year of the program, you could choose to go back to a school, and I chose to stay in Milan actually at Bocconi, because I felt that the education I was getting there and the lifestyle of living in Italy um, is unique. And as an American Canadian, that's not something that I can go back to easily. Whereas I could always go live in LA if I wanted to. And it's easier for me to go live in Hong Kong as well. So I decided to stay in Milan, and I loved it. I really feel like it was the right decision for me, university wise. I'm not one of those people who finds it easy to sit still or um, yeah, who finds it easy to sit still or just wait around. And so being able to move every single year really allowed me to see a little bit more of the world in my education. And that was something I really valued because it wasn't just in the classroom education, but it was the education of moving to a new country or continents every year as well, which I would say was almost equally as valuable to me. Um, in my 4 years of college.
I'm not sure if you read the book, Reid Hoffman's The Startup of You, and he talks about treating your career as a startup. How did you think about your career after school when you embarked on your career path? And can you describe some of the stops along the way from post college to today?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'll actually go back a little earlier. I always knew I wanted to go into entrepreneurship. It was just something that, as soon as I learned that you could start a business, that was something I was interested in. I think it's really because growing up in Seattle in the 2000s, seeing companies like Microsoft flourish, Amazon totally reshaping the city as I knew it. That was very impactful to me. Just seeing how you could create something that was bigger than yourself, and that was something that I was instantly drawn to. I originally went to the aviation high school because I wanted to start my own airline. And my idea was if I went to a school that was focused in aviation, I would be able to make the connections I would need so that when I was ready to go off and make it big in the airline world, I would have friends and mentors along the way. Luckily, I was able to with Brad, um, and through the relationship I had with him as a mentor, I actually realized that going into aviation is probably the most difficult entrepreneurial endeavor you can go after. It's a very tough industry to break into, very regulated. Um, and so from that, I decided, okay, I can't go right into it. I need to go into business school first to understand the unit economics of running an airline or the aviation industry. That's when I found going to the World Bachelor in Business program. And my thinking along the lines was, after 4 years of aviation education coupled with 4 years of business education, I would be in a perfect spot to launch an airline afterwards. It was a little ambitious, and my experience there in business school actually reinforced that maybe there needed to be a couple other stops along the way first to get to my ultimate goal of starting an airline. And so I looked at entrepreneurship a little bit more and saw where I could get my feet wet in the industry. I worked at a couple development shops in Seattle, doing business and product development in my summers, spare time, and things like that, just so I could start getting into the industry and start thinking about the problems that people were trying to solve with their companies, and see them a little bit more firsthand. After that, I decided it was time for me to give it a shot on my own. And I launched a company, which was a financial literacy learning company. Excuse me. It was almost like Duolingo for financial literacy. So kind of like a gamified platform where a user would go through, look at different modules, learn how to manage money, invest, things like that, with the goal of basically putting this towards either underbanked or no banked individuals. The idea then would be, once this individual would go through the course, they would be passed off to a partner institution like a bank that would then see them as a lower risk for lending, because they would have the financial literacy education that would underpin them as a less risky person who is going for a home loan or a mortgage or anything else like that. And so I started building that out. I built that out over a couple months, and it failed pretty spectacularly. Just did not do enough customer discovery at first to really understand the needs of my customers. And the market wasn't right for it as well, because at that time, interest rates were really low. Banks were lending to people a lot more readily than they are now, or as they are, or a lot more readily than they had in the past as well. And because of that, there was not interest on the partner institution side as well. And so I decided, okay, that's it. I'm not gonna continue to push this. And we ended up winding down the company. But it was a great experience, because I got my first taste of being an entrepreneur, and it really made me think, okay, this is what I want to do long term. I want to solve problems that actually matter. And that's when I started thinking about other problems as well, which kind of led me into founding Virtual Fork with my co-founder Jacob in 2020.
Well, tell us a little bit about the launch of Virtual Fork. What was the compelling reason that brought you to the forefront of launching this new company as a second-time founder, and how you decided to team up with Jacob?
Yeah, absolutely. So it all started, I can remember it really clearly. It started in 2020 when Jacob, who was a friend of mine at the time, we got together for a lunch, and just started talking about problems, just complaining about things that we saw were going wrong. And at that time, it was November, December 2020. Of course, the pandemic was in full force. We saw a lot of companies springing up in the ghost kitchen space, but none of them really seemed efficient. There were really large, capitally intensive companies like ghost or cloud kitchens, for instance, building factory kitchens at the edges of cities. There were other companies that were creating different celebrity branded menus like Mr. Beast Burger and bringing them to additional staff capacity in restaurants. None of them really felt like they were efficient. And so we decided we wanted to give it a shot ourselves and see if we could take some of the creative endeavors we had saw from our other experiences and had seen in the ghost kitchen industry, and bring them together. And so we did. We launched a couple delivery-only restaurants out of the back of a bowling alley in the summer of 2021 as our first endeavor as Virtual Fork. We were a virtual restaurant company at that time, but we were running into issues that any entrepreneur runs into when they want to start a restaurant, namely that ingredients are very expensive, space is really expensive. It's really hard to find quality staff and to retain them at a rate that's beneficial for them and for you as the entrepreneur. And so after a couple months, we decided to take a step back and go, okay, we understand that this is working, but we need to figure out how we can this and solve these problems because that's really why we got into it. We wanted to solve problems for people and namely change the unit economics of running a restaurant. And we did a big pivot. We changed the business model completely and we became a space sharing marketplace. And that's the Virtual Fork that we have launched today. It's a B2B marketplace for commercial kitchen owners. So commercial kitchen owners can monetize their downtime by hosting a renter food business in their space. And we couple this with a whole suite of tools to manage the liability that comes with hosting an additional renter, including tools for handoff, incident reporting, payments and scheduling, and also a protection plan that acts like insurance, which we'll be launching in the next couple months.
Wow, that's great. I know, and you kind of referenced the pivot and the startup before, and just the part and parcel of startups is navigating rough waters and wreckages. Are there any recent stories of note that come to mind in terms of dealing with such uncharted seas?
I think the entire startup experience can be summed up as, well, one, uncharted seas and troubled waters, but also, the entire thing, it can be a wreckage. There are so many things that are constantly breaking that you have to deal with, things that I hadn't even considered before going into this industry or becoming an entrepreneur myself. And so one of the most difficult things that I think you have to deal with as a startup founder is that nothing will go to plan. And so having contingencies on contingencies, backup plans, the old saying of hoping for the best but planning for the worst really holds true in the startup world. And so, I mean, the biggest story I can kind of go back to is the pivot back. I guess it was a little over a year ago now, when we had decided, okay, we're going to and create something new. We actually went through an entire customer discovery process for a different product before we settled on this space sharing marketplace. And we did this through countless cities in 3 or 4 states, and it was not biting at all. People were not interested in what we were doing, not because the problem didn't exist, but because there were incumbent players that could do it better than us and cheaper than us. And the value that we would provide as a startup did not seem to hold true for those companies as well. And so it came to a head in December of 2021, And we had to come together and think, okay, what are we truly solving for here? What do we want to make easier for these people? And what is the best way that we can do this moving forward? Um, and for us, it really came down to rent and kitchen space, because kitchen leases are very expensive and they're very difficult to deal with. And even if you have a kitchen lease, right, that your restaurant is locked into for a couple of years, there can be different macroeconomic factors that will determine the success of your restaurant. And so there seemed to be a big market opportunity, not only for guests who wanted cheaper kitchen space and all that safety and security built in, but for hosts as well, because they really needed to diversify their revenue streams so that if online ordering dries up tomorrow, they still will be able to pay their bills, keep their lights on, and at the end of the day, um, increase their revenue as well, not just cover their costs. And so that was the biggest wreckage per se of the experience so far. But through that experience, Jacob and I came up with a company and a product that is that much stronger and that much more helpful for different businesses of all sizes.
Anything you wish you knew when you began your kind of journey, your voyage as a second-time founder with Virtual Fork that you know today?
I think at the end of the day, you just have to do the hard thing. You have to do the hard thing. And there have been multiple times where I had thought, okay, I need to plan 10 ways that this could go, and I need to have all those contingencies. But at the end of the day, it never went how I was planning, and I just had to make it happen myself or make it happen ourselves as a founding team. Um, and to do that, it really comes down to, you know, sucking it up and figuring out like how to make it happen. And that might seem scary. It was scary for me the first couple times when I had to make decisions I thought were large for the sake of the company. Um, but through the experience, it really gave me and gave Jacob and I the confidence to make quick decisions with confidence, and be able to move forward. And I think that's the most important thing that you can have as a startup founder, because you are in charge of the company, and it is up to you and up to your team, to make decisions that are in the best interest of everybody. And that's what I hope we've done so far, and I think we'll continue to do uh, for the next couple of years.
And over the next year, what would you consider a success or a significant milestone for Virtual Fork?
There are a couple. Um, of course, we have metrics, KPIs, models of how we think our growth is going to go over the next year, and we're really excited about that. Um, we are in Austin, Texas now, but we're going to expand to a couple other cities in Texas, and then past that, through the through a couple other big cities and their metropolitan areas in the U.S. Um, I think at the end of the day, though, we we will continue working towards success through this year rather than finding it in one certain metric. The thing that we've come back to time and time again is that we want to change the unit economics of running a restaurant or a food business. And it's a really lofty goal. But I think that is where we can do the most good for small businesses, or medium businesses, even, because the restaurant industry has really small margins. And if we can, through our company and through our products, help these businesses flourish, grow themselves, um, and stay in business for longer, that to me is the success we're really trying to chase through this process.
Very neat. And with that, we'll take a beat for ads and we'll return to close out the show. Welcome back. We are now on the advice segment, and then we'll go to the lightning round. But prior to jumping in, I forgot to ask Cole. So someone's listening to this episode, and they're really excited either to rent available space or to host a renter. How would they get started or on board with Virtual Fork?
Yeah, so you can go onto our website, which is Virtual Fork, just how the two words sounds, virtual at fork, .io. And from there, you'll be able to book any kind of demos with our sales team, or be able to sign up right there directly. From there, what you'll be able to do is input information about your business. It's a very quick process. And then you'll be able to list either your space on our marketplace or find different kitchen spaces that could work for your business. From there, it's a simple process to get going, getting an agreement set up, getting set up with the tools we provide both hosts and guests. And we're really excited to bring on more hosts and guests over the next couple months. So if you're interested, please check us out. We would be excited to help you get started.
Great. And with that, we'll jump right into the advice segment or portion of the episode. What's one piece of advice you would have for first-time founders?
I think it has to go back to what I said previously, where you have to do the hard thing. It's not easy being a startup founder or building a startup. And I think that's the allure to some people. Being able to make your own decisions, be your own boss, embrace the struggle every single day of having to build something, of pushing that boulder up a hill. I think that is the alluring part, and anything that comes out of it, financially, recognition wise, anything like that shouldn't be the end goal. I think most startup founders who end up seeing that level of success come from it from a point of really wanting to engage with people, help customers, things like that. And I think that should be what anybody should talk about or think about when they consider becoming a startup or founding a company, anything like that. So yeah, that's the advice in a nutshell right there.
What have you noticed about either as a common denominator or a dominant trait in some of the most successful founders or entrepreneurs you know?
It's really interesting. I think it's not one thing. And I think we've seen that by, there have been startup founders who have found success who come from all different walks of life, whether they're from the US, a small country in, the middle of the ocean or anywhere else. And that's really exciting, right? I think it all comes down to a startup founder's mentality and work ethic, rather than who they are, where they come from, things like that. I think if I was to pick a skill or pick a belief that is a common denominator, There has to be a large amount of confidence in what you are building and a large amount of data to support that confidence. I'm not advocating for blind confidence in anything, but being able to or being the champion of what you're building and having data, whether it be actual numbers or stories or people even telling you that you've built something that's helped them, that fuels that confidence, I think is insanely important for a startup founder to have. And it's something that grows as startups see traction as well. And so definitely having that confidence in who you are, what you're building, and the traction that you're seeing, that translates to every aspect of the business. And it translates to the people you interact with on a daily basis. And I think that's the difference maker right there.
Any specific tools or frameworks or models that you rely on when you're dealing with crisis, with the rough waters?
It's not necessarily a tool per se, but I think that whenever we face something that is seen as a challenge for the company, um, we have to face it head on, and we have to face it with an understanding from the point of view of the customer. Um, as a founder, I can say 10 different things and be wrong 10 different times. What I say and what I decide effectively, can be meaningless if it doesn't help the customer or doesn't help the people who we're working with. Um, and so when I get into a situation that requires uh, some kind of decision making or thoughtful consideration, I have to come at it from a point of how does this help the end consumer? How does this help the people we're trying to help? And then a level deeper than that, how does this help our team? How does this impact our team? How does this impact me and my co-founder? It's very, very important to kind of consider everybody involved, um, because at the end of the day, we have to make decisions that are impactful for all of these people. And just thinking about myself and ourselves as co-founders, um, it really doesn't yield the best results for the company. And so if there's a framework or if there's anything like that, just consider the people involved. And I think that will be the most important thing um, when you move forward.
Any advice for someone thinking of, attempting to untie the Gordian knot of 0 to 1 PMF, product market fit, jumping into a startup or into the startup space from a more, let's say, stable career path of making the transition to being a founder entrepreneur or just joining a startup team?
Well, as you mentioned, 0 to 1 is the hardest thing, right? It's the make or break time for the company, but in my opinion, it's also the most exciting time because you get to be on the ground. Typically, you're in a small team, which means you can work really closely with hopefully really smart people and be really close to the people who you're trying to solve problems for, your customers at the end of the day. So if you're worried about things being hard, they will be hard. In fact, they might be harder than anything you've ever tried before, especially if you come from a stable career. Um, but you need to embrace it if you want to jump in, right? Like you're not going to find any kind of product market fit without at least a little bit of hard work. And once you hit that product market fit, the one in the 0 to 1, yes, things become easier, but also companies begin to grow, they begin to change, more dynamics start to become involved. At that point, you're more of a scale up than a startup, right? Because your company's idea and product has already been validated by the market, and now you're trying to grow as fast as you can, and gain as many customers as possible. Um, and so, if I were to offer advice, I think you would want to embrace the hard work that's ahead, and you'd want to prepare yourself for a different type of thinking than maybe you'd be used to in a more stable career. Not saying that it would be more critical or a more difficult situation, but you definitely have to think about things differently, and you definitely have to consider more angles than you would in a stable career. Um, and to me, that's exciting. I think to a lot of people who would consider becoming a startup founder, is also really exciting. And so, if you're considering it, find an idea you're passionate about first, and then take the plunge.
Great. And before we jump into the lightning round, just one last question. What wave will you charge next? Or in other words, what's next on the horizon for you in Virtual Fork? What are you most excited about in the coming weeks or months?
There's a lot. We're still early stage with Virtual Fork, which means we have a lot of waves ahead of us. Um, but I'm very excited to ride the wave, right? It's a very exciting time for the company. Personally, I think that I'm most excited about meeting and seeing the stories of people who we work with as customers, and learning how we've helped them, how we can help them more, what else we can do to make their lives easier. To me, that's the most exciting part because we can start iterating on our products based on the real world impact they have on people. We're going to see that a lot more as we continue to grow and as we continue to launch in new cities. For the company itself, we have a whole queue of things we're excited to implement in the coming weeks and months. Things from updates to our marketplace, our tools, the way guests can interact with each other and hosts can interact with their guests. Um, and instill another level of trust between hosts and guests on our platform and marketplace. And I think that's the most exciting thing from a company perspective because we will be able to help these people not only find each other, but trust each other. And I think in a world like ours today, uh, trust, especially in business, is becoming more rare. And I think that what we're doing with our products and with our company, um, is very valuable in that perspective. And I'm really excited to see how this changes how our customers interact on our platform and how we'll be able to grow that in the future. So there's a lot to come.
I'm excited to already have you on another episode just with the update of how you've solved the perishing inventory problem, how you were able to not only create the value in the space, but capture some of that value. And then at the end of the day, it really sounds like with this concept, you're able to help the small business owner, the small restaurant owner, the mom and pop shops that we know there's a ton around here in the Austin metro, as well as really any metro. But especially here in Austin, it feels like there's been a lot of pain in the industry over the last 12 to 24. So with that, I'm just going to jump
Yeah.
right into the lightning round. My favorite caffeine of choice is Outrigger cold brew coffee. Was interested to know what caffeine you prefer to wake up to every day.
I love a latte. just like something it's very classic, but at the same time, it's so good. It hits the spot for me every morning. When I was in Italy, I would go walk to the local coffee shop, spend €1 for a cappuccino or a cafe macchiato, and I miss it so much. So I'm getting into becoming my own barista, my own home barista, and my latte skills will improve significantly, hopefully, over the next little bit.
Any favorites, Italian restaurants, Seattle restaurants, or Austin restaurants you'd like to give a shout out to?
This is hard because as someone who works in the restaurant industry, it's like choosing your favorite child, Like it's kind of hard to just point out one. I will say in Austin, we are spoiled with a lot of great restaurants from barbecue, sushi, um, Tex-Mex, of course. Um, there's a couple that are a fusion of those. Loro, I think is great. Suerte on East Austin, but then also food trucks, right? That have great flavors that are, little shops, but draw big crowds. From hamburgers and chicken trucks to there's one South African food affair that makes the best peri peri chicken I've ever had. So, as good as those restaurants are, I have to say the food trucks in the city are where it's at.
And you're right, just like the Pacific Northwest, a lot of these restaurants originated from food trucks. So quite the food truck
Yeah.
culture here. Any favorite hobbies?
Um, well, I'm a rower these days. I rowed in high school, a little bit in college, but not a whole lot. So I'll get up early every morning to do that. Um, and then at one point, I consider getting my pilot's license this year, but with the growth of the company and the work necessary and needed to put in, I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not this year. I might have to wait another year.
Do you have a favorite sports team, a musical, a show?
Sports team, I have to say Seattle Kraken. Being a hockey fan as a good Canadian, gotta love it. And our team's actually good this year, or at least they're better than last year. So I'm a huge fan. Just wish we had hockey in Austin. That would be fantastic for me.
We got soccer now, which that was a big thing here. So
Yeah. Well, I've yet to go to a game, so I have to do that first. And then my hope is as the city continues to grow, we'll get a couple more teams. But I won't be fulfilled until we have our Austin hockey team.
growing up in the Midwest, Detroit Red Wings was a really good team. The Chicago Blackhawks are, brothers up north, Montreal, Toronto. So I definitely miss hockey as well. Tried playing it a couple times, and it is a exhausting sport to say the least. So props to
It
the hockey.
is. Yeah.
Michigan State was also pretty good. Had a pretty good hockey team. Any favorite vacation spots?
Favorite vacation spots. Living in Hong Kong and Italy, even just being there was so special. Not to say that LA wasn't great, but it's not on the same level in my books. Um, so I love I didn't really go to the mainland China when I was there, but I would have loved to. And northern Italy is just so beautiful with the lakes, the small towns, um, and the food that you can find in these little villages just situated within like the cracks of mountains. It's a fantastic and magical place in my opinion.
Who would your dream concert consist of?
My dream concert. Um, Again, I'll have to go back to being a Seattleite here. I love the '90s era grunge. I would have loved to see some of those bands live, at the time when they were big, right? Jimi Hendrix, Nirvana, Soundgarden, all of those would be amazing. Just unfortunately, not going to happen.
Dog, cat, or another animal?
Dogs for sure, for sure.
And then shout out to Tim Ferriss on this. If you could put anything on a billboard outside of the colleges and universities here in the United States, what would you tag that billboard with?
This one's tricky. Um, I'd say, either do the hard thing, right? Um, some version of that, right? I feel like college students sometimes are like complacent in what they do. They're, some are doing great things, which is amazing. But I feel as a whole, there's a big culture at American universities where you wait until you're done with university to try something new. And I think that university is a great time to try things new, to fail spectacularly. Um, some version of that. I think that would be great if we could change that in American universities.
Do you have a bucket list? Is there anything you would love to check off next this year on that bucket list?
I used to have one. I used to have one. At this point, I'm not sure if I do. It's probably lost in a notebook somewhere. Um, I think one big personal thing that I'd love to have happen this year. I'm a huge F1 fan. Here in Austin, I'd love to go to the GP and see that firsthand. Um, if I were to do one thing outside of, business personal this year or business this year, that would be my personal thing, my personal goal.
Anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we close out the show?
Um, I think overall, as a startup founder, it can be really alluring to try to create a company and try to make a big splash. At the end of the day, though, you have to be solving an issue for people, and that solution has to provide value. I know I've said do the hard thing 10 times at this point, but my own personal motto would be day by day. I really strive for that incremental progress every day. Um, and I think that is also something that I would really suggest people who are interested in entrepreneurship or, even going through their own headwinds at any point in their lives to think about, right? What is the most incremental thing you can do every day to better your situation, to gain a new skill, to try something new? Because eventually there's all that up. And that's what's important at the end of the day.
Yeah, incremental gains for exponential growth or exponential returns. We
Exactly.
talked about finance a little in the career, a little in this episode, and I think about the magic of compound interest. Um, it's insane. So, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. We look forward to following your successes. Until the next time, I hope you all charge the wave.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Charge the Wave, focused on entrepreneurs, executives, and icons who are assiduously building companies, cultures, and communities. Till next time, charge the wave.